طيب الصوت كده باين؟ سامعيني كويس؟ سامعيني يا نوران؟
I can hear you.
طيب سوري يا جماعة لو كنا اتأخرنا 2 minutes، كنا مستنيين بس نوران تدخل. This is Yasmin Roueni, EducationUSA Senior Advisor. طبعا welcome to our late session today. I'm so excited إن نوران معانا. I'll just give like a brief introduction about EducationUSA as a network للناس اللي أول مرة تحضر معانا. EducationUSA هي المصدر الرئيسي الوحيد عن المعلومات الخاصه بالدراسه في امريكا على مستوى التعليم العالي. اللي احنا بنعمله ان احنا بندي advising services for free لكل الناس اللي حابه تكمل دراسه في امريكا، سواء bachelor, masters, PhD او عايزين يقدموا على exchange programs as well. بيبقى عندنا monthly calendar بينزل على الفيسبوك بيج بتاعتنا EducationUSA Egypt، هتلاقوه برضو posted كل شهر ب different topics غير ال 5 steps المعتاده بتاعتنا. الخدمات بتاعتنا كلها مجانيه لاننا State Department Grant تبع وزاره الخارجيه الامريكيه، وعندنا اكتر من 430 مكتب في اكتر من 175 دوله حول العالم، فإتس a global network. نوران النهارده الدكتوره نوران هتبقى معانا ان شاء الله، هتتكلمنا عن الريسيرش رايتنج، وده كان توبيك كذا حد من الناس اللي كانت بتحضر لنا سيشنز لما كنا لسه في ان هاوس سيشنز قبل الكورونا والحاجات دي، كانوا بيطلبوا ان هم عايزين سيشن عن الريسيرش رايتنج، والحمد لله اهو ادينا قدرنا ان احنا نميت النيدز بتاعتكم. فاي هوب ان السيشن النهارده تكون فولفيلنج للناس، ويبقى عندكم الوقت ان انتوا تسالوا اي اسئله. هي يعني دكتوره نوران كده كده البرزنتيشن بتاعتها مش هتبقى الكونتنت فيها كتير قد ما هي هتسيب مساحه لو اي حد عنده اسئله او في اي challenges بتمروا بيها وانتوا بتكتبوا ريسيرشز بتاعتكم، فهي هتقدر ترد على كل الاسئله دي النهارده ان شاء الله. انا هميوت المايك، وبليز يا جماعه keep all of the questions في الاخر. زي ما قلت لكم كده كده هيكون في وقت اكتر للكويشنز، فما يعني ما تبعتوش الكويشنز وهي بتتكلم علشان بتتوه مننا. وميك sure when you send the questions to send it to everyone، علشان ساعات في ناس بتبعت لنا احنا privately by mistake. But just make sure ان انتوا when you type your question يبقى مبعوث للكل. بس معايا طبعا وليد زميلي في القاهرة. I think if you attend the sessions بتاعتنا regularly فأكيد عارفين وليد طرابلسي معايا في مكتب القاهرة، وهبة برضو من اسكندرية بس هي أجازة فمش هتبقى معانا النهاردة. احنا الثلاثة اللي موجودين في المكتب في مصر. Thank you so much, Noran, for accepting the invitation, and I'm so excited to hear all of the tips that we'll be giving النهاردة إن شاء الله.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to do this. That's something I've been teaching for a while, so I think it's something I talk about on a regular basis. But also, now that I've done this a huge, amount of research to finish a 350-page PhD, I think I'll be able to talk about some of the things that we as researchers or scholars kind of encounter when doing this. I want to share my screen, so I'm going to give it a try here. So it should be this one. Can you see anything?
Yes.
Okay. I want to convert it into a slideshow. So yeah, I just want to say that I'd rather get questions from you, because usually with research, everyone has a different struggle. Everyone has different types of questions depending on their discipline and what they're going through. So what I'm going to try to do today is give you very basic tips on how to do research or what research involves. And then I'll leave about, let's say, 15 or more minutes to get your questions and tailor the answers towards what you personally need. So it's basically going to be that presentation and then a Q&A session. So first of all, there's this question of what do we find difficult when we're doing research? Research isn't easy, okay? Just to begin with, it's not a walk in the garden. It's a laborious task, and it requires a lot of work and a lot of time. It's very time consuming. However, it's not impossible. It's still doable. It's something that you can do as long as you devote the time and to know that you will exert some effort. And once you understand what research involves, I think you'll understand how enjoyable it is. It still needs to be fun and it needs to be fulfilling. And you need to understand that even if you're not planning to teach one day, one of the most fulfilling parts about doing research is that you contribute something to the world of knowledge. Whether you're doing this as an undergraduate or a graduate student, the main objective of doing research is to contribute something to a field of knowledge, depending on your discipline and depending on your interests. But in the end of the day, whatever you do research on will contribute something to knowledge. So I based my discussion topics and the questions I have for you here on something that I usually use when I teach composition and writing and doing research. It's this book called Everyone is an Author by Linda Lunsford and a couple of other authors who specialize in doing research and writing about rhetoric and composition. And it usually gives one a very basic idea of where to start, right? So that's why they list the idea of getting started as one of the issues we could encounter or face when we even think about doing research. So based on some studies, the most difficult issues with doing research is the idea of getting started or knowing where to start, the idea of defining a topic or finding a topic, and the idea of, once you find a topic, the idea of narrowing down this topic, narrowing it down to something that's manageable within a doable scope that doesn't claim that it's going to solve the problems of the whole world, because sometimes when we think about research, we think that we're going to do something big that literally might change the world. However, this is not doable within like 100 to 300 pages, or even within when you do research for courses, if you do a 10-page essay, this can't solve such a big problem, something worldly and something universal, So like when we start small, we start something that's manageable and doable within, the limit of time and the limit of resources that are available to us. And then maybe if this is something you want to pursue in the future, you can make it big. You can make it the book that if you weren't born, this thing couldn't have happened, or a problem that couldn't have solved. However, when you're just starting, you need to find something that's more specific and more narrowed down than a general topic like abortion or gun control or politics. Those are very, very general and big, and broad terms and concepts. So if you want to do research within those disciplines or those fields, it's fine as long as you know how to narrow down the topic. And this is something we're going to talk about later here. But it's important also to understand what research itself means, because we keep talking about it and we know that academia involves that, but what does research really mean? So it basically, if you think about the word search, you're looking for something, and this something that you're looking for is knowledge that leads you to learn something about any topic that you want to know more about. It could be a topic that you've never heard about, but you're interested because it just sounds interesting, and conducting this research can lead you to know more about it. However, it can also be for you to learn about something you're interested in but don't know enough about. So it can be one of the two things. It can be something you already know about, you have ideas about, but need more. Or it can be something that you've never heard about and you'd like, to seek the knowledge that could lead you to understand this topic. So when you think about research, it's not that you're going to talk about something that has never been spoken of before. This is something that you really need to understand. When you talk about a topic, you have to understand that, especially today with this idea of the democratizing information and the availability of the internet, every single topic that you'll think about will have been spoken of before in different contexts, whether in academia or even in general everyday conversations. So when you think about research, you think about yourself being a contributor to a field of knowledge, being someone who's going to join a conversation, which means that you need to listen to what has been said. And the idea of listening here is not confined to just listening, like using this physical ability, but also the idea of reading and searching and trying to find information. So listening here means searching and seeing what others have done or said before about a specific topic. And then after listening, you don't respond immediately. You wait, give yourself a minute to understand a variety of perspectives, a variety of opinions, or a variety of researches that have been done before. And you need to be open-minded and more accepting of views that are not, that you might disagree with or that differ from your own. So after listening, you're gathering arguments and counter arguments, or points of view that you totally agree with and buy into, and others that you totally disagree with, because you need to be aware of those. And this is something that when it comes to the process of writing and your audience sits down to see what you've written, they'll be asking you questions about how about this person or this researcher or this scholar who discussed this, let's say, 10 years ago. Have you heard of them? Or yesterday, this was in New York Times. Have you read this article? Something like that, So it's important that you include those counter arguments, things that you do not necessarily agree with, all right? And then the very last step is you as the researcher or the writer or the contributor to the field of knowledge, when you add your own ideas to that conversation. And this is the process of writing. And the writing process, sometimes we say it's the writing processes because it includes a lot of different, steps in order to make whatever ideas you have in mind legible and understandable to an audience. But it's the very last step in the research process. It's the very last thing you do. Because sometimes we think that we know enough. We assume that the reader will understand what we want to say and will think that our opinion is valid and valuable. However, just a little amount of research will prove to you that you're not an inventor of an information, or you're not the first one to think about something. So it's important to think about it like that, as if you're joining a bigger conversation. And then here comes I think one of the biggest problems with research, because once we know what it is to do research and know where to start, I think a lot of problems will be solved. So here is the issue of getting started. Where do I get started? And how do I get started? The question of when is now. Like if you were searching for an answer to the question of when, if you're interested to do research, is now. Even if you're not in a specific academic program, even if you already finished, your undergraduate years or whatever, find a topic that you're interested in and start reading about it in order to prepare yourself for the minute when you'll be conducting this as an official academic research. So I know this is a problem, and this is a problem that's not confined to a specific group of people. The idea of procrastination, I think, is very broad and varied, and we all have it in different forms. There are people who procrastinate to the extent that they start the very last minute, and I'm guilty of that. I do that sometimes, and I'm trying, to learn not to do it, but I've been doing it for years and it's been working, so it's fine, but I try, it's important not to stop trying, to convince yourself that the earlier you start, the better. The earlier you start, the more time you will have to revise and make sure that what you've done is, that you're on the right track. So it's important to start early enough, even before being admitted to a certain program or being part of a specific track of research. It's important that you do this to yourself. Start now if you're interested. The fact that you're here attending this means that you're interested in doing research. So you might have some ideas to explore, but if you don't, I suggest that you start reading. And reading, although like many of us sometimes think that reading is confined to school, but reading should be a very, it should be a very, it should be a habit, more of an everyday activity. However, since you're interested in research, I'd rather you read something related to your field, related to your interests, related to something you want to pursue in the future as a researcher. So reading is the very first step, not finding a topic or not thinking of this is exactly what I want to write about. Unless you do the homework of reading and gathering information and comparing information and thinking about the information, you know, taking the time to think about the information, it might be hard to come up with a topic. So getting started has to start now, and it starts with reading. But as I just said, you know, it's part of it also is thinking about what you read. Part of it is annotating what you read. This is something we've done in, you know, as undergrads or even in grade school, this idea of taking notes, marking up the things you think are interesting, things that, you know, light a bulb in your head and tell you this could be a good topic, this could be a good question to pursue. So the idea of annotation when you're reading, the idea of taking notes, the idea of writing down things, recording whatever information you're getting, or not necessarily just that, not just highlighting the things you find interesting, but also the idea of writing what you think of these information, the idea of critically thinking of the information you're getting. Regardless of your discipline, whatever your discipline is, it's important that you have thoughts about what you're reading. And those thoughts need to be recorded in annotations, because sometimes we think we know, sometimes we think we will remember, but trust me, sometimes once you leave a book, like you think it's finished and you put it down and the information just evaporates. If it's not written down and if it's not annotated, either in the book itself or somewhere else, it just goes away. So list your thoughts, list your questions, your opinions, your just your take on the topic, you know, whatever you think, you know, your observation on the topic or whatever you think of it needs to be written down and listed. So once you know where to start and you start with reading and annotating, it's also important to think of how you can use this research as an opportunity to learn more about something, you know, related to your major or something that intrigues you, and start there, you know, when you're trying to think of a topic that you can pursue. Try to pick something that hasn't been overdone, because sometimes we go to the easy topics, you know, we go to something that has been studied before. However, the problem with that is sometimes it's exhausted to the extent that you can't really add something new. Although, you know, like I have to still say here that every person's opinion will still matter. Every person's take on a subject will still matter. So if you think that you have a way to, you know, add something to an exhausted topic, that's fine. However, because we want to add something fresh to our fields of knowledge, we want to contribute something new. So it's important to try to pick something that hasn't been, you know, studied or overdone before. Sorry. Yeah, so try to pick a topic that's still being debated, that people are still talking about it. Like, for example, many people are talking today about COVID-19 and its impact on everything in life, actually. I was gonna list some things that it affected, but if you think about it, it affected almost everything. So, so something it's today's topic, or something that's being debated, or something that's being commented on or studied, you know, try to pick a fresh topic. And try to pick something that really matters to you. Because one of the issues or one of the mistakes that some people make is that they let someone pick a topic for them. For example, they let their advisor or somebody that is mentoring their work pick a topic for them. And this is an issue because unless you like what you're doing and unless you're excited about it, it might not go as well as when you do with something that you like, a question or an idea or a topic or a thought that you're really interested in. So if you do want it to be a successful research, try to choose something that matters to you, because this excitement is what leads you, you know, to doing a successful research, and that in turn informs your views and the way you think about the topic. So this is important. Like, make sure that it's something you want to do research on. You want it to be fun, you know, you want it to be an enjoyable process, because it is hard. And unless there's something enjoyable about it, you know, this is where things go downhill. And I've seen that, you know, I've seen people who've done topics that have been imposed on them. And I won't say they don't finish. They still do the research and they finish and they publish things, but they do it very slowly. They make it the thing that, you know, doesn't give them the real pleasure of working on this thing. And like, that's why things take a lot of time. When it's something interesting to you, you'll find yourself reading about it and searching for information about it on a daily basis. So choosing a good topic like that, one that interests you personally like that, is key to success. An important thing to think about once you've at least had an idea about where you want to go with your research or what it's going to tackle, basically, even if you haven't narrowed it down yet, but at least you have an idea of where you want to start and what topics interest you. It's important to think about your rhetorical situation. And by rhetorical situation, this is something related to academic writing, which means the context, the circumstances that surround the research and the writing process. So those are, like what I have here on the screen, are things that are important to think about when you're still, you know, like either writing a proposal or thinking of how to write a proposal. Those are things to keep in mind in order to start the research, but also when it comes to the writing process, those are things that you need to always keep in mind whenever, even when you're done and you're revising, go back and make sure that those things are clear to you first, because unless they're clear to you, they won't be clear to your audience or whoever you're presenting your research to. So first of all, speaking of audience, you need to think about the audience. Who are you going to write this research for? You know, if it's an academic research, definitely your first and immediate audience will be your mentors and your advisors and your colleagues. But also this audience is way broader when you're doing something bigger than a class research. You know, if you're doing a paper, not you know, if it's not a research paper and it's more broad and it's something that you want to do for a master's or a PhD or a publishable article or something like that, it's important to think of the field that you're writing for and who are the big names in this field and what kind of conversations they are having, what backgrounds they come from, and things like that. You know, like it's important to familiarize yourself with your audience, because you're not writing to yourself. You're not just writing to your immediate audience. You need to take into consideration all the, you know, the bigger picture, all the wider audience that might be interested in your topic, you know. So you're sort of addressing them without necessarily explicitly doing that in your writing. Another important thing is the purpose. Why? Why is your research important? Why is it important to you? And why is it important to your audience? And why is it important to your field? How can it change something or contribute something to the field of knowledge that you're interested in, or to the discipline that you chose, right? So the question why needs to be answered to yourself, but it also needs to be if you're writing a proposal for a research, it needs to be there. It's one of the main questions that the proposal needs to answer. A research proposal definitely has to answer the questions of what, why, and how. What is the topic? Why is it important? And how are you going to conduct this research, or how are you going to conduct this project, whatever it is, right? So proposals need to answer those questions. And an early step, when you're still looking for information and trying to find the information, it's important to know the purpose of why you're doing this to begin with. And then the genre comes. The genre is the type of writing you're going to be doing. Are you going to write an academic paper, or are you going to write a thesis or a dissertation, or what kind of writing are you going to do? And this is basically more the outcome. But also there are different types of writing. There's within academic writing, there is analysis, there is argumentation, there is comparison, there is so many different types. There's, you know, like even within those genres, there are subgenres. So it's important to think about what type of writing you want to do. and what type of genre are you going to use. And once you you know, search a little bit in your field and see what kind of genres are being offered, what kind of writing people do, you know, you'll get an idea of how to learn about this genre in order to fulfill the assignment of, you know, producing it yourself. And then we move to something, again, something as important, or probably the most important in all of these, is your stance, your position, your thoughts, your addition, whatever you're going to add to the topic that you're doing research on, right? So your stance is basically your take on a certain subject, your position from it. Where do you stand from this topic? If it's a debatable topic, do you agree or do you disagree? If it's something that hasn't been researched before and you think it's important, the stance here, or your position, will be a person who thinks this thing is important, you know. So the stance is, again, you know, like your thought or your take on the topic. And this is something that you need to clarify, again, clarify for yourself, because it's the most important thing that you need to clarify to your audience. All right. And then comes the context, which, I mean, we talked a little bit about the context in discussing the audience, but the context is everything that surrounds the topic, meaning be it the audience or also the social circumstances, the political circumstances, the scientific circumstances. It depends on your discipline. Again, like all of this is broad, but you can take this and tailor it towards what you're doing. Context means the history, the social circumstances, and everything that surrounds this topic. And definitely part of this is the audience. So you'll see that some of those overlap, kind of. But this is basically because those are things to take into consideration in regards to doing your research. And then the medium and the design, those are kind of related and similar. So the medium, again, it depends on your field. Like somebody doing research in the field of mass communication or journalism might want to create a video for their research, or do something, conduct their research through other tools than reading and writing, you know, or other than the written word and the read word. They can use other tools like audios and videos and things like that. It all depends on the context, and it depends on the audience that you'll be delivering your research to. And the design is part of that too. And by the way, you will need to do research on those things in order to conduct your own research. But this is, again, this is part of the process. And as long as you know this and you list it as one of the things that you'll be looking for when doing research, you will know where to get this information. And always remember that there are advisors who will help you with those things. Doing research always requires a mentor. And your mentor or your advisor, or whoever is helping you conduct your research, will definitely have information for you that, you know, helps you with all of those different things, especially when it comes to the genre or the medium or the design. But the other things are important and they're easier for you to do. So just keep them in mind before conducting research. Now, one of the things I mentioned here is that you need to find a topic that interests you personally. You need to find a topic that is doable and that is fresh and it's debatable, that people are interested in. However, sometimes when we say that in classes, what we get from students is very, very general and broad topics, like the examples I give you here. It's important to narrow down your topics so you know how to conduct the research. It needs to be something that is not too general or too broad. You need to move from general to manageable or specific, you know. So here's an example that, you know, shows you what it means to choose a very general topic. So someone could say women in sports, for example. And again, this is an example from the Everyone is an Author. So a general topic could be something like women in sports. This can be so many things, right? Women in sports. This can be related to soccer or to basketball or to tennis. It can be so many different things. So one way to narrow it down is to specify, make it more specific, and go to something like, as you see here in the example, injuries among women. I'm sorry, I need to move something to see what I wrote here. Injuries among women athletes, right? So if you notice, this is even more specific, even narrower. And you can even go more narrower and do something like injuries among women basketball players. So here we didn't just specify the gender and the topic, which is injuries, but we also made it even narrower and went to basketball as a specific sport. And then even more narrower, you'll go to something like patterns of injuries among collegiate women basketball players compared with their male counterparts. So see how it's more very, very specific. So here we don't only have the sport and the gender and the topic of injuries, but we also have something that leads to a comparison here compared with their male counterparts. So the research here will involve getting information about the women injuries, those athletes in basketball, but also seeing what happens with their male counterparts. So the comparison can lead us to know more about what benefits women are getting, or like how different it is from one gender to the other, or things like that. It can lead to so many different questions, right? So once you narrow down your topic, as I mentioned before, it's important to see where you stand from the conversation, the part of listening or doing research and seeing what's being said about this topic. So once you can just jot this down on a scratch paper and then go and do some research. And a very basic research can start with a search engine like Google, for example. However, because we're talking here more about academic research, so Google can give you an idea, a general idea about the topic, but to go to somewhere where you know that the sources you go to are more reliable, you can go to something like Google Scholar or Google Books. And mind you, we're still in the knowledge, in the building knowledge stage. This is not the research you're doing for, the project you're working on. This is basically for the topic itself. We're narrowing down the topic and we're thinking about where to find basic information about it. So Google can help you. Thanks to the internet, this is available today. However, in order to go to something even more advanced and more tailored towards your research and something that you can actually use in your own writing, you can go to academic journals like JSTOR. I mean, like I'm listing here some of the ones in my field, but I'm sure that in different fields there are different types of academic journals that that have information for you on whatever the topic you choose will be. So JSTOR, News, MLA, and and many other academic journals, that can be helpful in that stage. Those are for general knowledge and general information, but they can also be used for something more advanced. You can actually use some of those quotations or summaries of those articles in your research when you sit down to write it, or when you actually apply all of those things that you've been researching or searching for. All right, where are we? Sorry, popping back. Okay, so again, what we're talking about here with all of that is background research. This is the very basic research that comes before the actual research that leads to writing down the final product, be it a book or a 10-page paper. So you want background information that surrounds the topic, not necessarily tailored or specifically about the topic that you're looking for or the question that you have in mind. It can be very, very broad information that you can find in encyclopedias and almanacs and a lot of other sources that give you broad information and general information. Encyclopedias are the best thing about it is that they're not biased. They don't give you the information that's based on opinion or that is based on an argument. They give you the basic facts. So in order to topic and go to encyclopedias and the types of from any kinds of opinions or judgments or arguments. One of the sources students out is Wikipedia, where you can use Wikipedia. I'm sure that many of you, like being academics, you will know that we always say that Wikipedia is a no-no. However, it's not useless. You cannot cite it and you cannot get the information from it as a reliable, authoritative information. However, you can always use it, again, just to get general information. And this is something you do on a daily basis. If you think about research and what it means for real, you'll find that you do this even when you're like thinking to buy a new phone or a new car, or or even when you go shopping, you compare things and you do research if you're trying to find a specific type of outfit, right? So this is something you do daily. So Wikipedia in this case is what gives you this general information, and then you go to the specifics, when you settle on the thing that you want to do research on or to continue pursuing, right? So as I said, just be careful, because once you list Wikipedia as one of your sources, you will notice that it won't be accepted by any institution as an authoritative or as a reliable source. But if you tell your mentor, your instructor, or your advisor that you got some general information from Wikipedia, they will actually, appreciate that, because you're interested in the topic and you're going there to get the background information or to do the background research. But they won't appreciate it if you're using it as a reliable source. And this is basically because anybody can add an entry to Wikipedia. People like your neighbor, who might not be an academic, can just go there and add a Wikipedia entry. And yes, they're trying hard to make it reliable, and they're trying hard to reference their sources and say where this information is coming from, but it's still a long process that they're working on. So it's still not the source to use as, a reliable source of information. Right, so use it for doing this background research, right? And then I know I listed a lot of things that could be, that are important and could be said of as like the most important process or the most important step in the research process. But every good research and any good research begins with a question that it aims to answer. So you need to articulate a research question. So you found your topic, you have some ideas, or you listed some ideas about this topic, you tried to narrow down this topic, you got your background information. In order to actually start writing or to start gathering the correct information, you will need to articulate a very good research question. And sometimes we say research questions because it's not necessarily a single question that you're trying to get an answer to. Sometimes it's a bunch of questions. Sometimes it's a bunch of questions that can be collected in one, right? And sometimes it's a question with its sub-questions, but it's important to have a question. You cannot do research without having a question in mind. So once you narrow down your topic, you need to do this, sit down and do this process of writing down this question that will guide your research. It's important before you write down this question that you know what type of question leads to a research, right? So as I mentioned here on the slides, you will see that a good research question should be simple and focused. It needs to be narrowed down, simple and focused, and very precise and concise. But it also needs to be a question that requires more than yes or no, right? Yes or no questions don't lead to research because basically their answer is a yes or a no, right? So it's important to think of an open-ended question. By that, we are talking about the questions of how, why, what, when, and those types of questions, and like if you notice that those questions are leading to a simple 2-3 sentence answers, then you're still looking, you're still doing something that will not lead to a research. It needs to be a question that requires some gathering of information. So a question here, and we mentioned this a few minutes ago, this idea of, for example, what is the impact of COVID-19 on education? And how are teachers, for example, responding to the current circumstances or the current health situation? So a question like this, if you notice, is timely. It's something that's still spoken of, and it could be debatable if you think about it. It's specific. It goes to education as its scope. It doesn't say what's the impact of COVID-19 on life or on, you know, on Egypt, on America. It doesn't do that. It doesn't go to something that's as broad as this. It limits its scope to something that is researchable, something that is manageable within one research project. So what is the impact of COVID-19 to education specifically? And how are teachers, so here we're going even more narrower. We're going to teachers as our, you know, main target. How are teachers responding to the current circumstances? And if you want to make it more narrower with an example like this, you can go to something like, how are university teachers, university professors responding, or how are grade school teachers responding, you know? So you can even make it even more narrow if you do that. If you ask questions about specific situations, specific locations, specific types of people, so the more specific it is, the more successful and manageable your research will be. And bear in mind that the process of finding this question is, you know, integral to conducting a successful research. And as I mentioned, it should be a question that leads to your purpose. You know, we talked a little bit about thinking about your rhetorical situation and thinking about the context and thinking about the purpose. So you will definitely have a purpose in mind, even if this purpose is simply to add something to your field of knowledge. So the question needs to be something that leads to this purpose. It needs to lead to something like a report, an analysis, an argument, a comparison, no matter what it is. And it, again, I will always keep repeating those words, that it depends on your field of study or your discipline, right? It should lead to something like that, something expandable and extendable like that, and that is not answered within like few simple sentences or a yes or no type of answer, right? Okay. I'm sorry, it's just that I can't see the top of my my slide right here. I need to move something to be able to see that. Okay, so plot out a working thesis. And I think like anybody who is interested in academia or in academic writing will always find the thesis or the thesis statement in you know, like when you take it further to stating your thesis, we find that this is something that is the most commented, the most commented on topic in academic writing, but also the thing that will always require revision and require work, which is this idea of plotting out your thesis. So when you find the best possible answer to your research questions, the next step is to turn this answer into a working thesis. So the thesis is basically a claim or a statement that you make to tell your audience or your reader what exactly your research will do, or what exactly you think, and based on that, what your research will explore or do, right? So your working thesis, and mind you, there's a difference here. It doesn't have to be your final thesis. This could be the very initial step of finding a claim or you know, making a claim and constructing a working thesis, to just, again, like this is in an initial process, could be a hypothesis or just a claim that you know that you want your research to explore and prove, right? So explore as in when you do the listening process, when you do the, you know, being part of a larger conversation process, and then to prove when you enter the conversation and when you add your own thoughts or your own findings, depending on what kind of research you're doing. So it's important that once, again, you found the topic, you narrowed down the topic, you did the basic or the background research part, and you sat down to write a research question. The following step will be to use this answer, the best answer to this question, and make it a working thesis. This can lead you to, you know, branching out and making sub points for your research. So the basic part is this idea of having a working thesis or a claim or a hypothesis or a thought that your research will explore and prove. Right. And then this will be the last part of we're just searching and not synthesizing yet. We're not collecting the data and putting them together in conversation or responding to them or whatnot. This is the part where you actually go to the step of finding the sources that will be used in your research paper or research project, whatever it is. So again, the basics will be to start with something like Google, even YouTube sometimes could be a good resource for basic information and general information, Wikipedia, as I mentioned, or even social media. And again, it depends on your topic. If your topic is related to the younger generation, for example, or something related to media in general, social media can be a very good resource to see what people are thinking about. What are people talking about? And sometimes it doesn't need to be that. It can be your topic as part of a group, for example, a group of researchers who, created this page on Facebook and they're discussing this specific topic. You'll see there like what ideas are being discussed and what ideas are already in research, so where to start or how to be part of this larger conversation, because definitely social media today is part of the conversations that research needs to take into consideration. And then a very critical step will be this idea of knowing what types of sources you need. So there are the primary sources, which are directly related to your topic or can be your topic. Let's say, for example, I want to do an analysis of this book, right? So this will be my primary source. This will be the main subject of my research, the main topic that my research explores and tries to prove something about. A primary source would be this, but a secondary source will be something that discusses this. Somebody else, let's say another scholar, decided to analyze the same book. So part of my job as a researcher is to go see what they said about this book, right? To go see what their analysis looked like and whether they compared it to other books or not, and so on and so forth. So once I find this article or this research that somebody else did, this will count as a secondary source. And both are as important to you as the topic of your research. The primary sources are the main source of information. The secondary sources is the place where you get all of the supporting ideas for your topic, all of the counter arguments, or you see what has been said about your topic before, everything that has been said about your topic before you decided to do research on it or to explore it. And then there are other types of sources. And again, I mentioned this with Wikipedia and the sources online, this idea of scholarly versus popular sources. Popular sources are usually those sources that you find on the internet ending with something like .com, or which are usually, like the .com stands for like commercial sources. So those are usually popular. They're not necessarily peer-reviewed or written by professionals or or that cite their sources or tell you where they get their information and their facts. So they can be used in specific cases and in specific disciplines. However, they can't be the most reliable sources. They are just there to give you ideas or where you get general information, as we said, but they can't be the source that you use in academia. What you need in academia is scholarly sources or peer-reviewed sources. Some things that can help you evaluate your sources and know whether they're reliable or not are things that I just listed here, like the title of the source, the credentials of the author. What do you know about this author? If you do some research, or if you look up this author just on Google, what do you know about them? The publisher, is it a trustworthy publishing house? Is it a known publisher or not? The URL, as I just said, like if it's a .com source, you will need to think about it. Some of them are reliable. However, it's just important to look at all the other things to know whether you can use it or not. And then the documentation, whether they cite their sources or not, the language that is used, is it formal academic language? And you will get a sense, like every one of us will notice when things are written haphazardly without revision or without relying on a good source, and when things are written for, like the things we see on Facebook, for example, or in social media. The style matters, the way the things are written, and the purpose, like why is this source available to users or to consumers as readers or any other type of audience. So those are things that can help you evaluate the sources that you find. And again, so like research is not basically about finding sources. You don't be very happy when you find sources. It's important to find the reliable sources that can actually lead you to a worthwhile research, something that will be approved by your institution or by whoever you're doing this research for, whatever institution or whatever university or school that you're doing this for. It's important to use libraries. Libraries are definitely, we all know how excellent they are for finding sources. I know we don't use them much today in the age of the internet, because there are digital libraries and there are digital resources that we can find. However, it's important to try to go to a physical library, because sometimes, depending on your topic, if your research is on something archaic or a little bit dated, then physical libraries will be important. In physical libraries, or even the digital ones, it's the place where you'll find references and encyclopedias and books and periodicals, academic journals. Access to academic journals can sometimes only happen through libraries. So libraries are an excellent resource for resources and for sources. You need to talk to a librarian, because like libraries, like people do actually their research on doing libraries, or conducting work in libraries. So ask a librarian when you're looking for something. This can be very helpful when you're conducting your research. And use keywords that can lead you to your research. And if the keywords are very specific, sometimes they might not lead you to what you want. So you might do some trial and error, either on a library database or even online. Just some trial and error until you find something that you're looking for. And when you're actually on a database or on a, like a search engine for an academic journal, this is where you put your keywords, and usually those will lead to what you're looking for. And we can talk about that with the questions if you want something specific, like if you're looking for something specific and you sometimes find it difficult to find when you go to those resources, either online or physically. And then the final thing would be this idea of conducting field research. Not every source is a written source or an even audio-video source. There are sources that are living around us. Those people who, especially in the medical fields, you will have to conduct your research on actual humans with all the approvals required for doing something like that. So this is definitely part of it. You go and get the approvals for conducting something like that. Interviews, those are definitely an excellent resource, especially if you're doing interviews with someone who is an expert in your field. And then the last thing will be surveys and questionnaires. And those, sometimes we even see those on social media, or get emails from a colleague saying, hey, I'm doing this research and I'd like you to take this survey. It only takes 5 minutes and it helps with my research, So it's important to learn, like go and try to learn how to do those, or look at examples from things that you've got yourself, and see what they've done and how you can tailor the method towards your personal, research needs. This is about it. I didn't think it was gonna take that long. I was preparing to do this for like 30 minutes or something, but I just, I just got carried away trying to give you everything that you might want to think about in terms of research. But thank you so much. And I'd like to get your questions. I don't know if we can extend this beyond the hour, but I'd like to know what you want to know. If you want to know more things about conducting research, or if you have difficulties that I didn't address in this presentation. Yeah, but this is about it for me.
Ron, thank you so much for this. This has been really, 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 really informative and kind of entertaining to whoever is interested in academic writing specifically. I know that your topic of interest has been a certain analytical aspect of comics or related to comics.
Right.
Maybe people would like to hear more about your example of writing on this. And of course, afterwards, we can have as many questions as you guys have. I'm sure that some have asked already some questions, but let's hear about your experience a bit, if you can.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to be brief though. I think like maybe my example could a little bit like, you know, like is linked to what I started this presentation on, this idea of having a good research question and a topic of interest. So comics, the main issue I had with comics is this idea of the question of how do you read pictures? You know, in most academic fields, we're more used to reading words on paper. And the idea that comics or graphic narratives, starting with Mickey or Disney comics, you know, the ones we got when we were kids, to the comics that are very sophisticated today that discuss politics and philosophy and so many sophisticated topics. You know, this idea of how do I write about comics? How do I conduct research or conduct an analysis that addresses pictures or images? So in order to do that, you know, this was my research question. How can someone read a picture? And this question has been answered in many fields like visual arts, for example. However, me as an English major, I needed to do some research and go find what visual arts do and connect that to us, you know, what we do as, you know, scholars of the written word, and mix the two together and put them in a question form. So readers, when they go read a comic book, for example, you know, have answers to the questions they have about the book, but also can conduct an analysis of a comic book. You know, if they know what kind of questions to ask, they will know how to answer those questions, especially because comics today have been very important, especially here in the United States, that many disciplines use comics as a teaching tool. But also in the English department, we do teach comics about the Holocaust or about gender and sexuality, or, you know, so many different topics. So it's important before you discuss the plot of those comics to know how to analyze comics. So again, the research question was, how do I analyze comics? And the answer was my 350-page dissertation.
Thank you so much, Noran. That is something I'm really interested in reading, by the way. Maybe when the time comes and you share your theses, you'll share that with us.
Absolutely,
if you can.
I'd love to.
Brilliant. And I hope that you're being safe over there in the US.
I mean, I'm staying home. That's
okay.
basically
All right. All right. Let's take a look at some of the questions that we have received here. I see someone asking
maybe I
about...
need to stop sharing the screen, right?
Okay. You mentioned earlier a certain book, and someone was asking about the name of the author again and the name of the book. If you can just type that down in the chat box.
Sure. I am having some technical issues here, but I can, yeah, here we go. I can type it here.
Okay.
So it's called Everyone is an Author. Okay, and the author of this book is Andrea Lunsford. And I mean, this is what I use in my undergraduate courses when I teach freshman or sophomore courses to first or second year students. There are more advanced sources, but this is for a very, very basic knowledge of writing. You know, it's not a very advanced book, but it gives you a general idea.
Okay, brilliant. Dunya is asking, is that right or wrong to read many books for one writer and put the information from his books only? I think it's fairly obvious that we need to diversify sources, but I'll leave that to Noran to further explain.
I think it depends, because let's say, for example, I want to write an analysis of something by Shakespeare, then I definitely will read his other works or something like that. Or
Okay.
I'm using a certain critic to analyze Shakespeare, then maybe I'm gonna use the same critic because I'm interested in that. However, if the topic is a debatable topic or if it's an argument, then it's important to read other authors or other thinkers and scholars about this topic, because again, we want to join a conversation. So we can't have this conversation with one person and there'll be like hundreds of others writing and talking about it, and we're basically ignoring them. So reading to someone and leaving everyone else away, and if it's not the purpose of the research, then something might be wrong. We might want even to consult them out of curiosity. But it's definitely important to go there and to try to find other sources and see like what they're saying.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Gina is asking, will the slides be shared, and is this presentation recorded? Yes, it is being recorded. Thanks again, Noran, for allowing us to do that. And
No problem.
we'll be posting it shortly on YouTube and sharing the link on Facebook as well. And she's asking as well, can I request the presenter's contact information?
Absolutely. I think I put them on my, what's it called, on the slide, but now the slide is gone. So I'm just gonna give you my email here.
Okay, thank you.
Both emails.
Yusra is asking, please send to us reference in academic writing. Is this a general question, or I'm not sure?
To be honest, like there's plenty of references, and it depends on what you want to do exactly with your or where you are from the process of writing. Because if it's just you're just getting started, I can give you very basic, sources like this one, for example. Like everyone is an author could be one of them. However, something that usually helps people with writing is the Purdue OWL website. I'm gonna type it here. If you just Google that, it can lead you to good information about not just where to start with the research, but also on citation and using different guides, citation guides like MLA, APA, depending on your field. Things that are related to writing, the process of writing itself, and writing academically and what that entails. So it can give you a lot of information, but I can sit down and probably share that with you guys to share with the group. I can sit down to think of other maybe books that help with that, with academic writing in general.
Brilliant, thank you. M is asking, I want to know the difference between interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and multidisciplinary approaches. I need to know that for the sake of applying one of them that best serves my purpose in my master dissertation in English Lit. Can we briefly answer that?
So interdisciplinary.
Is it possible to briefly answer that?
I mean, interdisciplinary would be the easiest for me to answer, because my research is interdisciplinary, which basically is what I just said. This idea of being an English major, but working with someone from the visual arts department and someone from the philosophy department and so on and so forth. So it's mixing or linking different disciplines to one another and doing a research that is not necessarily just confined to your field of study. Multidisciplinary, I believe, is the same thing. Transdisciplinary, I'm not sure. Although, like, I might be able to claim that it's the linguistic difference that leads to almost the same thing. But what I know for sure is multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary lead to this idea of linking different disciplines and having them converse with one another.
Okay, Rose is asking, are there steps to follow in writing a master thesis? For example, in chapter 2, what to start with, then so and so. Is this a general question or something specific? I'm not sure. Again.
Sounds like a specific question. I think, like, if you got to chapter 2, then you probably know how to conduct research. I'm guessing that if you're stuck with chapter 2, that's a different question. If you're stuck with chapter 2, then go back to your plan and see what chapter 2 was supposed to do. But yeah, definitely, if you are in chapter 2 and you're doing the research part of your chapter 2, then definitely you can follow those steps for getting whatever you need with that chapter. Research is not limited to the beginning of the process. It's a continuous process that you will do until the last day of writing your master's thesis.
I would add to that there could be an outline to begin with when you're writing your whole thesis, so you can have a general idea at least of what to write in chapter 1, 2, and 3, and then when you come to actually writing your chapter 2, you would have a rough idea of what you need to write. But as Norana said, it's a process, so it's not wrong to change what you want to write midway. Maybe you would update your outline as you go as well. So just make sure you have a certain outline to start with at least. And then when you get to chapter 2, chapter 3, you will know what to do with them.
Absolutely, that's correct. And also, like, not necessarily with change, you can be still doing the same thing. And let's say, for example, you shared this chapter with an advisor or a mentor, and they're saying, hey, this part still needs some more research. So you will do, again, like, you'll go do the same process again of, like, I'll go to Wikipedia to get an idea of, like, this specific part, or the specific topic, and then we will do the same thing over and over. It might not be as extensive as when you started, the very beginning of the process itself, but you will do it in different forms throughout the process of writing your thesis.
Excellent. Ms. Susan Nigm, who is one of our regulars, I remember seeing the name many times, is asking what decides which citation type to use. And she's mentioning a few types.
Yeah. Can you tell me the examples? Like, I can see it here. Yeah. MLA, APA, and Chicago. That's a very good question. What decides the style for you is your discipline. Like, I know for sure, being, an English scholar for about almost 12 years now, I know that what we use in English is MLA. Linguistics, for example, which are still part of English, use APA. So it depends on your discipline. If you just simply go and open an academic journal in your discipline, in your field of study, and look at the citation type, you will get a general idea of what it looks like. And then when you do some research on what it is exactly, you will know whether this is what you use or not. But, like, generally speaking, humanities usually use MLA. Again, and there are some exceptions like psychology and linguistics, they use APA because their approach is more scientific. And that leads to this idea of that scientific disciplines usually use APA more often than we do. And then Chicago and many other styles are used for, some very, very specific disciplines. So it depends. If you have a very simple conversation with your mentor or your advisor, or, as I said, if you read something in your field, you will get a sense of what style is commonly used.
Thank you for the tip. Hussam is asking, what is the research objective?
I might not need clarification on this question, because it could be asking what's the objective of doing research in general, or it could be when I sit down and list my objectives. That's a different story.
I would say that is the one. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if that's the question, then it is the answer to the question of why. Why is this important? What's the purpose? How can it contribute to this field of knowledge? What does it add to you? What does it add to what you know about this topic? And how can it contribute to academia or to your discipline or to this specific context that you're researching? So it's, again, simply put, it's the answer to the question why, the question of the purpose.
Okay, Gina is adding another resource, a book called The Craft of Research. I'm hoping people would be aware of that one. Alette is attesting to how Purdue Online Writing Lab is a brilliant resource. Thank you for that. Hazim is asking a question. Some research depends on systematic literature review. In this kind, we don't need to make hypotheses. My question, how do I conduct this research according to research methodology?
According to research methodology, and when you don't need to make hypothesis. I think you can still follow the steps we discussed here. It's just that your methodology will be different. You know, some research requires having a literature review, and some others don't. Some of them have a hypothesis or a claim, and some others don't. Some of them try to answer a question, and some of them try to conduct an analysis or a comparison or something like that. It's not necessarily something that starts with a hypothesis. It usually have to start with a question, though, even if there's no hypothesis. You do research because you want to find some type of knowledge, and this is where you start. So this could be, actually, this could, in and of itself, could be a good research question. And to find an answer to that question, I think you will need to, if it's specific to your field, then I think you need to consult someone in your field. However, generally speaking, you don't necessarily have to have a hypothesis or a thesis, a thesis statement or an argument. It can be done differently. However, it will always have to have a question. It has to be based on a question.
It's the essence of the research itself, to have a question, I would say.
Exactly.
Okay, I think Hazem is being technical again in another question. What is the difference among control variable, mediator variable, and mediator variable?
I have no idea.
Honestly, me neither. Is this? I don't know. Okay. Should we know about? I don't know.
It doesn't. It sounds like something, again, like very specific, very discipline related. So again, I would direct you, Hazem, to your mentor, your advisor, or if you're not working with one yet, then anyone in your field, actually a professor in your field, even if you're not working with them, might have better questions, better answers to those questions.
Say there are as well like blogs in every field available where people share their knowledge and share answers to questions like these. If you cannot find it like in one place, you can find it elsewhere. This is how you do research. Anyways.
Right.
Sorry we couldn't help with that one, Hazem. Yusra is asking a general one, how to judge an idea for research.
How to judge an idea for research?
You'll be basically judging yourself, partly, so that should be hard.
I think if the question, the way I'm seeing the question is probably this idea of how to know that this is a researchable topic, how to judge that, you know, that this is a subject for research. And I think like we discussed that a little bit, but again, simply put, it's this idea of what has been done with it before. If it's exhausted, if it's something that has been researched several times before, then ask yourself, what can I add to it? Is it important? You know, ask yourself this question, is it important? Is it a significant topic? And answer the question of why it is important. Try to think of if it's new, is it debatable? Is it researchable? Is it something that doesn't lead to yes, no question or a limited question? All of those types of things, you know. And once you have answers to those questions, I think we'll be able to judge that this is a good research topic or that this is doable.
Okay. Mirna, who is, I believe, one of our colleagues at East, is commenting on something for science. It depends on the requirement of the June. So I think it was a follow-up to one of the questions from before. Thank you, Mirna.
Yeah.
Is it okay if most of the books that I use in my dissertation are in PDF form and taken from electronic libraries like Gutenberg, PDF Drive, etc.?
It's not a problem at all. However, you will need to cite them. And when you cite them, it's important to know how to cite electronic sources. And this is something that Purdue OWL tells you how to. So if it's an electronic source from, let's say, from a journal or from a database or something like that, you will need to tell your reader where exactly you got your sources. And you can even use a citation machine online and put the source as, you know, your citable source, and it'll tell you how to format this in the words cited page. So I actually, in my dissertation, I would say that 50 or more than 50 books were actually on Kindle. They were not physical books, they were ebooks.
Okay.
So yeah, that's not a problem at all.
Brilliant. Mustafa, this presentation will not actually be available on SlideShare, but the presentation and the session will be available on YouTube. So we'll be posting that link shortly. Noha is asking, if I'm writing a research proposal to apply for a scholarship, such as Fulbright, how far do I take it?
I'm not sure I know that.
Noha, do you mean that like if you're burning all your cards, if you're exposing everything you're going to do in your research or not? If so, I believe that you're trying to convince a committee of the viability of your research.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Anything to add, Noran?
I'm good. I just was waiting to see what everybody was thinking about, but other than that, yeah.
Right. Yasmin will upload the presentation on SlideShare apparently, so okay. All right. In an English lit dissertation, is it obligatory to set a hypothesis as a starting point for more research to prove? I mean, can't I set a research question and go exploring data, trying to find out an answer?
I think it depends. It's nothing, I don't think that there's anything that's obligatory. I think I can start a research with, again, like all of them start with a question, and this question can lead to a hypothesis, or it can be a question that leads to, an answer that says, for example, I noticed this and this and that in those specific literary, texts, and I will do whatever, like I will prove something. So it doesn't have to start with a hypothesis. I think it depends. If you found something that leads to stating a hypothesis or providing your reader with a hypothesis, then fine. But I don't think, I mean, again, like it's not necessary, it's not obligatory. Hypotheses are more common in scientific fields. However, there are cases in English, when you're writing an English thesis or dissertation, where you have a hypothesis to begin with, but it's not obligatory. It just depends on, your purpose. Again, it goes back to your purpose of why you're doing this.
Hazem is asking, what software do you recommend to learn to analyze data? I would say a human brain, because if you're researching something related to literature, you wouldn't need like a huge set of numerical data, so you would need a software to analyze it. But I don't know, we're talking about literature here. I don't know if we will be in need of a software to analyze data. Do you think, has there been anybody that needed that? Noran?
It depends on the data, I think, like, again, like the specificity of the topic, like what kind of data are we looking at? Because I personally don't know, and I didn't need that in my own research. So I'm not sure I know, but again, it depends on the type of data, and it depends on the discipline. So, yeah.
If it's related to a scientific field, and if Myrna is still on the line, Myrna, do you know of any software that we can use? Okay. Yusra and Suzanne, you're welcome, of course. Ala is offering help to Hazem. That's brilliant. You have a book on the question of Hazem. Ala, okay, you guys can communicate later on. I hope Ala, if you can like put me in copy of any emails that you guys exchange, that would be really helpful for me to know and try to help future students. Okay, people are asking for it again. Okay. Please send us your YouTube channel. It will be shared. Myrna's sharing something. Thank you so much. She's saying Tableau Public and SAS. So if anybody's asking for statistical analysis, and Tagreed is sharing one as well. Thank you guys. Okay, this is turning into a really cooperative session.
And by the way, this actually leads to a very important thing about research, your peers, because peers are a very good resource. If you're looking for something that the internet can't answer for you, if you don't have like easy access or like easy communication with your mentors, those are people who are around you, you know, people who are actually specialized in your field. Again, like, because it depends on your discipline. If your discipline requires something that specific, then definitely your peers and your colleagues can answer your questions even faster and easier than anyone else who's not, you know, familiar with those tools or books or whatnot. So use your peers as a resource.
Okay. I was asking, how should a dissertation end up in English Lit, with an end, or should it be open-ended, paving the way to pose questions for further research in the future by other scholars?
That's a good question. Again, like there's no obligations or mandatory or one-size-fits-all way of ending anything, especially with a dissertation. The dissertation ends with a general dissertation, you know, with academic writing in general, usually ends with sort of restating your thesis or your topic or your hypothesis or your whatever you've conducted this research for, your purposes and your whys and what's and hows. So a restatement of your thesis statement, and also with general ideas and comments, and sometimes it could be questions for further research. So those are, like, everything you mentioned here are things that can be put in the conclusion or the ending of the dissertation. The conclusion should be short because like it basically sums up the ideas and it just wraps up what you've done in your research, so it doesn't have to be extensive. However, it needs to be meaningful. It needs to add something because you don't want to end abruptly. So it's a reminder to the reader of what you've done. It gives them some questions to ponder beyond the dissertation. And it also ends with your comments, your concluding statements, something that the reader remember. Think about it this way. If you're reading a book, you want the very last page or few pages to be the most memorable parts of your work. So just make sure that it's something that's impactful and something that has meaning and something that will, the reader will remember, you know, even if they read the whole thing and they might miss some of the minute parts in the details, make them remember your conclusion, make it something memorable.
Okay. Is it good to read for Arabian writers and make them my reference for my research?
I think it depends on the scope. And it depends on where they write. If they write in academic journals, then yes, by all means, use the research. And since you speak both languages, translate it and use it for your research purposes. But it's important that their work is published. It has to be published by either a known publishing house or in academic journals. And if you are using them, like for example, in my MA thesis, I compared an American novel to an Egyptian one. And in this case, it was important for me to use this and to use secondary sources that are written in Arabic in, you know, the analysis part. So it's fine as long as they are authoritative sources. And that there's a variation, but also it depends on your scope. Is your scope limited to a certain language or nation or you know, or a specific location, or is it, you know, broad enough to include some Arabian writers? I mean, the scope will determine this for you, but it's fine as long as they're authoritative sources. It's fine to use them.
One last question. M is asking, what's the difference between a master's dissertation and a PhD dissertation? That's a good one, I think. That would be a good one to wrap it up.
In what aspects are they different? To be very honest, the dissertation is a bigger master's thesis. The master's is basically a training that trains you for doing a PhD in the future if you want to. So the MA process, or the writing the MA thesis, is a training process. It's this practice that you do before you conduct a larger research, which is the PhD. The scope is different because you're asked to write research in 75 to 100 pages. It depends on where you are. Some people write hundreds of pages. Here in the US, it's usually limited to 50 to 75 pages and 100 pages maximum. I mean, the master's thesis, and then the PhD is usually, the dissertation is usually more extensive and bigger. However, the same process of research is what you do for both. Definitely the PhD in most cases is taken more seriously because this is what leads to what you'll be contributing to academia in the future. However, the MA is a baby dissertation. It's not very different from the PhD dissertation. It's just a matter of, yeah, exactly. It's
like
just a
that
matter
one.
of, you know, yeah. And that's why some people actually use their master's thesis as the core of their PhD dissertation. They just expand it and do more research. So it's just that the MA is limited, the PhD is larger and more extensive.
Okay, all right. Difference between field study and case study?
There isn't much difference. Case study is when you look at a specific case, and especially in the fields that require that, like in psychology, for example. Psychologists do that. They focus on cases, or like even in law, you know, sometimes in order to write an MA or a dissertation in law, you will look at certain cases and you'll be thinking through them, right? Philosophers do that as well. They look at cases where a philosophical question or a philosophical proposition, they look at it and to see whether it will work or not. And it's not necessarily that sometimes it's more practical than that. Sometimes it's a case study where you have, let's say, for example, a human being sitting in front of you where you're looking at this case, or, you know, it's so many different things. Field study is more, like this idea of interviewing people and doing the surveys and the questionnaires and those types of things. But it can also being on a physical field, you know, again, it depends on the discipline. Sometimes you'll have to be in the desert, or sometimes you'll have to, you know, go to like the countryside to do something related to agriculture or whatnot. So in this case, you'll be on a physical field. It's not something within, you know, the limitations of the written word. It could be, you know, further than that. So both are things that are beyond the internet and what you can get from like information that you consume. It's more information that you go grasp from outside, you know, your four walls. Like you have to be outside and doing them, or where that involves other people, real people, not just avatars on the internet.
Okay, that's a good perspective. Are there any other questions? Anyways, Ron, this has been really, 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 really enjoyable, at least for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Talking. I'm sure that whoever attended has benefited a lot, especially for those who are applying for Fulbright and others who have been really interested in the subject of graduate studies. We're very glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Opportunity. You're absolutely welcome. Anytime you feel like you would like to add to the community here, we would love to have you again and have you talk about the subject.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. That was a pleasure to me as well.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Again, this session will be uploaded to YouTube and we will be posting the link shortly. Maybe today, tomorrow, but definitely this week. Thank you, Noran, again. Thank you for the attendees. We will see you on another session. Probably tomorrow we'll be having one on personal essays, actually, tomorrow. So we continue to talk about writing. So that should be enjoyable again. Right. Nice. Enjoy your night, guys.
All right. See you guys. Have a good one.
Bye, Noran. Stay safe.
Bye-bye. You do too. Bye.